guys, I have two very short lectures for you today. The first one we're going to talk about is Boolean search strategies for research. This should not be completely foreign to you because the librarian started discussing it, and I thought it would be super relevant to just kind of revisit it and make sure we understand how to use these while we're beginning to search for our literature. So most importantly, this search strategy, it has a mathematical background. It comes from mathematicians. It's a way for us to tell databases, specifically PubMed, since most of you guys will be doing most of your work within PubMed. It tells the database how to string searches together. So if we're looking for more than one concept, we can string them together with or and not. That's kind of confusing. So we can use or, which will combine two things. Like in this case, we're talking about black or white, referring to colors. This could be and, black and white. And then this could be and not, where we say black and not white. So this one, if we use or, we get a much more wider scope on research papers. Where if we use and, we get a much more narrow scope. You can see here that this is just kind of focusing specifically on the term black and white, where this one, it kind of overlaps. We're looking for black or white. So we'll get many, many more papers by using or, and we'll get fewer papers by using and. And if we use and not, then we get very specific papers, right? This is saying I'm not looking for colors in general. I'm looking for specifically the color black versus white. So this is a bit more focused on a particular aspect of what we are trying to research. So this is a way to really kind of refine our search inquiries, and it gets tricky. Like I said, there is no one way to do this, and you kind of have to practice. And this is going to help filter our search results more accurately, which will save you lots of time and will not allow gray hairs to pop up on your head because you're stressed out because you can't find exactly what you are looking for. So let's say, for example, I am searching for information about a specific topic. Let's say I'm looking for ACL injuries. Let's say I'm looking for ACL injuries and rehabilitation. Well, this would give me much more specific and precise instructions to the search database. So, for example, if I'm using the word and I say ACL injury and rehabilitation, this is like telling the database that you want books or papers that discuss both ACL injuries and rehabilitation together. So this narrows down that search by including the results that contain the specified terms. So then you will get papers that will come across the board and just say, this includes ACL injury and rehabilitation. Now, if I used or, so let's go back here. If I said I want ACL injury or rehabilitation, well, then you'll get a lot of papers on ACL injury and you'll get a lot of papers on rehabilitation, but it doesn't specify what type of rehabilitation. So you might get 200 papers on ACL injury and rehabilitation, but that will be within a search result that maybe has 1,400 papers. So you have to really you'll have to go through a lot of abstracts to kind of figure out which papers are useful. Where if I say I want ACL injury and rehabilitation, that is telling the database to find those papers, those 200 papers that are within the 1,400 papers. It's saying find those specifically. Okay, and that's kind of how that works. So when we're using and, we're narrowing down our search topic. If we use or, we're expanding the search topic, right? If we're using not, this is including specific terms from the search results. So while we're practicing searching for our papers, I do encourage you to try to put some of these things together. And I'm going to give you a wonderful video by NIH that I think does the best job of showing you how these things work with one another. And I will load that video up with these slides. Now, again, when we're using quotation marks, this will be finding exact phrases. So, for example, I'm doing a research paper right now where I'm looking at neuromuscular and neuroendocrine disorders within a certain population of people. So if I just write neuroendocrine disorder, I'll probably get 4,000 papers that I have to go through. But when I'm writing neuroendocrine disorder, I might want to put that in exact phrases. So I might want to say neuroendocrine disorder within phrases, or within quotation marks, and then I might want to say and neuromuscular disorders within quotation marks. And what will that do? Well, that will say it is looking for papers that are specifically trying to identify neuromuscular and neuroendocrine disorders that are referenced within the exact same paper. Now that is very, very specific. So when I get specific like that, I want to make sure that I'm getting the papers I need, but I also have to be aware that that might only give me 3 or 4 papers, and that has happened to me. So then I have to go back to the drawing board and try some different phrases. And in a moment, I will show you some of my search terms that I had to use to figure this out. And you should go through the exact same trial and errors that I had to go through. And it's really important that while you're doing that, you're also making note of what phrases you used before. And again, I'll show you my board in a moment, but let's move on to the next portion here. And as we get further into the presentation here, we will talk about the asterisks and we will talk about the parentheses a little bit, but let's just kind of focus on this right now, because this is going to be your bread and butter. So when we're talking about or, again, we're expanding our search topics, right? So if I were to use my example of neuromuscular disorders or neuroendocrine disorders, that's going to give me all of these papers that mention neuromuscular, and it will give me all of the papers that mention neuroendocrine disorders. Now, again, keep in mind, that's going to give you a very, very, very expansive list of papers you'll have to sift through. I don't use this one too much because it expands the search so much that it just takes you forever to find things that are actually relevant to you. So if you wanted to say, let's say we did yoga or Pilates, but let's say we wanted to do children with autism as well. We could say autism, parentheses, and yoga, or autism and Pilates, right? So if I use those two search strings, that would give me papers that have to do with children or adults with autism and yoga. So we'll say that's here. And then it will find anything that has to do with autism and Pilates, right? So now you've expanded your search within specific phrasing using autism, yoga, or autism and Pilates. All right, so that's how that would work there. And again, if we used and to narrow that search, we might want to say exercise and nutrition. So now we're telling the computer, we're telling the search database to find me only papers that mention these two things together. And of course, you'll notice that it's in the parentheses, right? So if you wanted to do, let's say, let me give you guys an example that might, maybe you're talking about athlete burnout, right? So maybe you might want to put in a specific phrase, athlete burnout. And we know it's a specific phrase because we're putting it inside of these parentheses here. And maybe you want to put and recovery. So if I just did athlete burnout in parentheses, I would get a handful of papers. But if I did athlete burnout in parentheses and recovery in parentheses, that would give me specifically what I am looking for. Or let's say you wanted to do athlete burnout and stress management. Well, those are both very specific phrases. So I would have athlete burnout in parentheses. Then I would use the word and then I would put stress management in parentheses. And that would find me very specific papers. Now, if I went back and I said athlete burnout or stress management, that would open up the floodgates where I would have a series of papers on athlete burnout. And then I would have a series of papers that have to do with burnout. And this burnout could be anything outside of athletes, right? This might be doctors. This might be ER surgeons. This might be paramedics. This might be military, right? So it's going to give me a lot of papers that are outside of the realm of athletes. Okay. And then if we move to not, I don't use this operation much, but we'll talk about this operation. So let's say we're using the word not, and we want to do nutrition, but we want to exclude everything with supplements. So we would say we want nutrition, not supplements. And you can see that that is all within parentheses. It's a very specific phrase. So if this was nutrition, or we'll say this was nutrition and this was supplements, it's going to exclude anything that is going to remove supplements. Or let's say we wanted to talk about, let's go back here. Let's say we wanted to talk about athlete, oh wait, where was that at? I forgot where. Let's just say we want to talk about athlete burnout. But when we're talking about athlete burnout, let's say we want to exclude amateur athletes, right? So we would say athlete burnout here, not amateur athletes. And that would give us a very specific set of papers that would be excluded of anything that mentions amateur. Now, you might still come across papers that mention amateur because they might use a different search term. So you just have to go through. That's why I said this is like very painstakingly long because you have to go through all of these processes. So again, this is the words that we use. Now we can also do combined operations, and that video, it's only about a 15-minute video. I'm going to give you that from NIH. It's wonderful. So this is where it gets a little more complicated, and this is where you have to practice. So if I wanted to combine all of these, I'm looking for something very specific. Then I can say exercise and nutrition or diet, but then I want to exclude supplements, right? So I'm looking for anything that is focused on exercise and nutrition or diet, because nutrition and diet, those are synonymous. We could use both of them. But within this search, I don't want anything with supplements, right? Or I could say exercise and burnout with athletes, exclude amateur athletes, right? So when you do results like this, if you're not good at it, you'll generally get an error message saying there is nothing. Or you might get just a handful of papers. You might get 2 or 3, which then you have to kind of look at your search string and say, okay, well, maybe with exercise, I can put energy expenditure. And with nutrition, I could put macronutrients. And with supplements, I could put not supplements or creatine, right? So I can get more specific, but that's how I have to kind of play with the words a little bit. You never will hit the jackpot on the first attempt. I promise you. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so like I said, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the difference between parentheses and quotation marks. Now, when I was learning how to kind of master the database search process, I always got confused by quotation marks and parentheses and the difference. So I think I spelled it out pretty simply here, but let me just kind of explain to you what these major differences are. So when we're using quotation marks, these are used to search for exact phrases. So when you put these terms in quotation marks, such as what I did earlier, right? Neuromuscular disorder. That is an exact phrase that has 3 words, right? Neuro, muscular, and disorder. When you put it in a quotation mark for a phrase that you're looking for, right? Diabetes-induced retinopathy, right? That is an exact phrase. I have diabetes-induced retinopathy, right? I would put that into phrases or into quotation marks because it's an exact phrase. This will allow the search engine to look for those specific words. So you're telling it to find these words in that sequence in a cluster of words. So you're asking it to find those specific words and in that order without any variations. So when you're looking for exact phrases, the more technical the phrases, such as neuromuscular disorders, the less papers you're going to find. Now, when it comes to the parentheses, this is to group together multiple search terms. So this acts like brackets in math, right? And this is kind of ensuring us that the search engine process is going to look for the terms inside of the parentheses as a single unit or a priority before considering the rest of the inquiry. So let me give you an analogy. So if we are using quotation marks, it's like saying, I want a turkey sandwich and cheese. The sandwich maker has to give you that exact combination, nothing more, nothing less. You're telling the sandwich maker, right? You go to Subway, you say I want a turkey and cheese sandwich. That's what they're going to give you because you put parentheses around it and it's giving you a very specific result. I'm sorry, not parentheses, quotation marks. When I use parentheses, the difference is like telling the sandwich maker, first, pick either turkey or ham. Then add cheese or avocado. So the parentheses are ensuring that the choices are grouped logically, so that they give you one of the meats and one of the toppings, but not random combinations of all four. So it gets a little tricky. And if that doesn't make sense, you're probably like, what the heck is he talking about? I have some examples, okay? And I'm going to give you guys examples. But these two, they've always kind of confused me, and I always tried to figure out how to use them interchangeably. And maybe you already understand it. You're like, I got this, right? So if I'm using parentheses, I might say athlete burnout or sports burnout. And if I'm using quotation marks, I would just say athlete burnout. So when you're using parentheses, this groups similar terms together for athlete burnout or sports burnout. They're very similar terms, so you're grouping those together. So you're saying to the computer, hey, find me something that talks about athlete burnout or an alternative, which could be sports burnout. I could ask it in parentheses to say, hey, computer, find me nutrients or find me dietary nutrients. Now, they're in parentheses because I want the computer to look for those two things together. Let me give you guys some examples. Okay, so let's practice this with a lens on it that is related to your specific type of science. So let's say we're talking physical therapy or rehabilitational sciences, and I want to do an inquiry on ACL injury and rehabilitation. So here's my search query that I can put into PubMed, right? I could say, give me ACL injury, and since it's in parentheses, quotation marks, I'm asking it to find that term. And please find me rehabilitation in quotation marks. So I'm saying find these two terms together. Now I could do even more to that, right? I can use another and here you see parentheses and quotation marks. So with the parentheses, I'm asking the computer to find these words that could be clustered together, right? Physical therapy or physiotherapy, right? So those might be two different ways of saying the same thing. And then here it says not surgery, right? So here is a search query that is a bit more complex, right? And again, there's no right way to do this. You just have to do trial and error. So here's the explanation of that, right? So ACL injury, this puts the exact phrase into the computer. I want to find ACL injury. in quotation marks. And this ensures that only results with that specific injury are going to be retrieved. Then I add and, right? And we know that and, where's and at? Here it is. It's going to narrow things and get them more specific. So now if I say and rehabilitation, that's going to punt papers that might be like ACL injuries in football, or ACL injuries in hockey, or ACL injuries in volleyball, right? So because I put rehabilitation, that's going to make things more specific. It's going to now tell the computer that I'm looking for how this phrase is going to interact with this phrase, and this narrows that scope. Now, when I use the parentheses here, and there's an or in there, I'm asking it to also retrieve these terms that could be used interchangeably, right? They're both physical therapy, so they're synonymous, and this will make the search more inclusive. So now I'm getting more specific. And then when I say and not surgery, this is excluding results that are related to surgery. So maybe I don't want to look at surgical treatments. Maybe I want to look at ACL injury and rehabilitation that is through the lens of either physical therapy or physiotherapy. And it has to do with individuals that did not have to get surgery. They only had to get physical therapy, right? So I'm getting rid of the surgery piece. Okay. So here's another one. Let's say, and I'm just trying to give you guys examples to show you how we can interchange these words using these specific Boolean research terms. So this one is physical therapy research, stroke rehabilitation. So here is a search inquiry where I say stroke rehabilitation, and you can see that it's in parentheses. I wanted to, or quotations. I wanted to find this term, or I wanted to find post-stroke therapy. So now I'm looking for two populations. I'm looking for people who are in stroke rehabilitation or people who have recently undergone stroke rehabilitation or therapy. This is telling the computer that I'm looking for these two things interchangeably, this or this. And I'm looking for it through the lens of physical therapy or occupational therapy. And I'm not looking for speech therapy, right? So it's just showing you a different kind of sequencing of how you need to kind of wrap your head around putting these commands into the database in order to get exactly what we need. So this here will explain that to you. And I did my best to kind of speak your language. So if something here is not making sense, feel free to let me know. But I am not a rehabilitation scientist. And then I just have a couple of things here of why this works. And you can read that. I'm not going to go through that. All right, so let's go through sports psychology now. If there's those of you that are in the PCEP program and doing sports psychology. If I wanted to find athlete burnout and I wanted to kind of have a couple of different search inquiries on that, well, I can put athlete burnout and, right, this is in quotations. I want that exact phrase, and stress management or mental fatigue. Okay, so stress management, I want this phrase found with this phrase, and I want this phrase found with this phrase and this phrase, okay? And then this one puts another and high performance athletes or professional athletes, right? So now I'm telling it, give me athlete burnout, give me something about how they manage stress or how they experience fatigue, and I want this in professional athletes, not amateur athletes, right? And you can read how all of this kind of works. I did my best to write it out and explain it to you. Here's another example, sports psychology, okay? Team dynamics and performance. And of course, we got the mighty Man United all huddled up here after scoring a goal. Glory, glory, Man United. And so here is my search query. I have parentheses. I want them to find team dynamics or group cohesion, right? This and this are synonyms for one another, but they're both specific terms I'm interested in. So please find me this or find me this. And I put them in parentheses and specific terms, right? So I use my quotes and my parentheses. And then I wanted to find athletic performance or sports performance. So there's another example where athletic performance or sports performance, those can be used interchangeably. They're kind of the same thing. So you're saying, okay, also keep an eye out for this word or this word. And, right, so now we have two ands, intervention strategies, right? So I'm kind of clustering these words that I'm interested in, or these topics that I'm interested in, and I'm stringing them along into a search string. And this will explain that to you. You can read through that, so I don't have to do it. And again, if this is something that's not sticking right now, it takes practice. And every time you change one of these terms, here, you got to make note of it, because you don't want to keep, sorry, I had a hiccup. You don't want to keep repeating the same mistakes and banging your head against the computer because you keep getting the same results, right? So it takes a little bit of time. You have to track the terms that you're using, or the terms that you used previously that didn't give you anything. And you never really want to start off like this with a dynamic, a pretty intense search string. The best thing to do is start off with two concepts, right? I want to find athletics performance and intervention strategies. That will start leading you down the right rabbit hole. If you start putting together these long strings like this, it gets really complicated. But I'm going to give you guys an exercise where I'm going to have you do this, and we're going to do it for a grade, and you're going to get some practice for it, okay? So why does this, oops, sorry about that. Why does this work? You can read that on your own. I'm just kind of reinforcing some things here. Okay, and then the last two for the exercise psychology folks in the class. So let's say I'm looking at motivation in exercise and adherence, right? So here's my search query. I have exercise motivation or exercise adherence. Maybe these two words are used interchangeably in your world. They're both with quotation marks because those are the exact phrases that I am interested in. And I'm telling the computer, hey, I'll take this or this. So be on the lookout, computer, for this one and for this one, or some of them that might have both. You're telling it to be on the lookout, right? And I also, computer, want you to be out on the lookout for a paper that has this and this with this or this, right? So you're giving the computer these margins to operate in. And then you're saying, computer, I don't want anything with sedentary behavior, right? And this is really going to narrow down your search. This is really going to help you find things that are very, very specific. And here, when you look at the explanation, it kind of tells you that, if I'm looking at exercise motivation or exercise adherence, the use of or broadens the research to cover both concepts. I'm saying I'm interested in this or this, right? And maybe in your world of science, those are used interchangeably, right? Think about what I said earlier in my world where I say diabetic-induced retinopathy or diabetic retinopathy, right? So they're used interchangeably. They mean the same thing. And the computer might miss something because I say, okay, well, look for the word induced in the center. The computer might miss what I'm looking for. So I give it another alternative to look for something that is very similar, just termed differently. Okay. And then let's look at this one here. Let's say I want to do exercise psychology in mental health and exercise. So this one's pretty easy, right? Search query, exercise and, right? I want you to find this word and this word or this word, right? So I'm putting it in parentheses because this and this could be used interchangeably, right? Let's say a group in the United States uses this word, this phrase, and then groups in Sweden, they use these phrases, right? So I'm saying I want this in combination with this, or this in combination with this, and not medication. I don't care about any sort of pharmaceutical intervention with mental health, right? So these are just examples, and then you can read this, and then here is just the conclusion, right? So we're going to narrow with some searches, we're going to expand with others, we're going to exclude with others. So that is all I have for you right now, and good luck with searching for your papers. I kind of wanted you to struggle a little bit with looking for papers for your first lit circle. And that's why I kind of folded this in later. I want you to see how frustrating this can be. Now, for your second lit circle, I am going to ask you guys to keep track and keep record of your search strings, right? I want to see how many times you had to revise this or how many times you had to write it or recreate it to find the papers that you wanted. That is all I have. I will see you guys later this week.